We've got a roof that's crumbling. We've got a leak. We've got a mess up on top of that roof. And he said, and those people's lives were the same way. And he said, we'd get down on our knees and we would pray for these people. We would pray for them into the kingdom and we would heal the roof. And maybe heal and get believers. He was on fire. I really enjoyed him because he was solid. You can trust everything he said. And there's a lot of roofers where you can't. So that's this idea of the true worship, connecting with the Holy Spirit. The other part of it is authentic worship. It's not fake or put on. You don't have to wear funny clothes to worship. You actually don't. I read that somewhere. And of course I've changed my garb a little bit. I like to do the black cassock and the surplice for Lent. It's just the black, is a sign, really, folks, of dead to the world. And in the early church during Lent, our stoles would be black also. It's a sense of dead to the world. And we're sort of living in the tension here because our white means we're like the white-robed army of martyrs in Revelation. They're wearing white. So we've got two things going on. We see the victory in Jesus Christ, yet we realize we're still beset with sins. So we don't even have to go through a specific liturgy of worship. I thought you'd like to know that too, because we're liturgical. And I like that. I like it because it covers a lot of bases. We have the changing of the seasons to reflect different attitudes of our life and to reflect on different parts of the pieces of our life. But I remember reading about how Matt Redmond, a pastor, quit having any music at his church for a time. No music. And I think it was because he sensed the conflict where the people thought that the music and the worship and the raising of hands and those kinds of things, that was really the worship. And he wanted to demonstrate that worship wasn't quite like that. And he ended up writing that song, The Heart of Worship. He said, I'll bring you more than a song. And that's what we're talking about in spiritual worship. We're talking about bringing everything he's given us back into worship. So when we talk about authentic, I think we can refer to biblical examples of Moses. Moses did not want to lead. Then he got called and he said, nope, sorry, I don't talk too good. And so God said, well, how about Aaron? And all during Moses' ministry, he was having some challenges with the people. And he had challenges with himself, didn't he? He said, I'll strike the rock, by golly. God didn't tell him to strike the rock. Half the time he was cursing the people and saying, God, you ought to take these people. These are not my people. And then the other half of the time he's saying, God, please don't destroy them. So that's a wonderful biblical example of the same kinds of things that we can go through when we have conflict. And when we think God's not where he's supposed to be, we can say, God, I don't think you're where you're supposed to be. But I would also include a petition for a little clearer revelation. Because we don't want to get into giving God orders. We do want to connect with him and we do want to be honest before him. The other example, of course, and we've heard this many times, is Job. Job had everything taken away from him. His friends were telling him to curse God and die, and he wouldn't. And it got worse and worse, and he got sores, and the dogs were licking the sores. And he did complain, though. He was quite honest with God. And then God, in chapter 38, just asked him a few questions about his life. Like, where were you when I established the foundations of the earth? Good question, God. I think I'm going to concede, and I'll praise your name anyway. And then, of course, in the Psalms, David's got some excellent Psalms. For Lent, I would recommend Psalms 51 and 32. Those are penitential Psalms that David wrote when he got in trouble with Bathsheba. And then you even have examples of Peter and Paul. Peter does some strange things. He needs to get restored. Paul gets blown off of his horse. or his donkey, I'm not sure which one, and because he was kicking at the goats. That's what Acts says in one of the accounts of the story of Paul. He was kicking at the goats. And Jesus says, why are you doing that? So, and Paul is frank about that. They're open and honest about their frustration and challenges. And that is authentic. That is authentic. But there is another sense that we can see, is that if this problem, if this pain, if this sickness or circumstances are needed to fulfill your purpose and glory, then don't take them away. Sometimes we need to walk through the fire. Sometimes we need that. This is really intense warfare against our self-centered nature. You know, that brings me now to Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. In other words, let's find out what God's purpose is, and we will do that by transforming our minds. I don't know about you, but I think our human nature is naturally self-centered. We have this survival DNA in us, but part of that needs to be transformed so that we can do what the Shema and following would say: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and with all your strength. That's the first commandment that Jesus quotes from the Old Testament. Verse 1 of Romans spoke of bodies, and I think that's what this verse echoes. It says, hey, it's all of us, every part of us is supposed to be renewed by loving God. So in celebrating our happy fast in Lent, I think we also can say, well, that famous quote by Dr. Phil, what were you thinking? We're talking about the renewal of our minds, and we can say, well, what are you thinking? And what does the Bible tell us about thinking? Well, it says we're supposed to be thinking, but Paul writes in Philippians chapter 4, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Renewal of our minds, and yes, I think, you know, gloom and doom, the end is coming kind of thought sometimes, but Paul tells us, and our religion, rather our theology tells us, we need to be thinking on other things. How are we going to be praising God and giving thanks continually if we're thinking about the flat tire we had last week? How are we going to do that? So we need to find whatever it is, and there are people that are better at it than I am, but as you go through these 40 days, remember our purpose is to please God. And He actually has been quite gracious to us here in America. You know, we even though we may be a little bit down right now, we're still a very unique country. We need to be transformed forever and ever, however. When you want to please God, when you want to become His best friend, you'll renew your minds by including God in every activity. You know, maybe you need to give up TV and pick up the classic, a Christian classic. Or maybe you could pick up the purpose-driven life.